The Golden Globe. Chapter 10. Anakin and Tahiri walked through a large stone hallway in the palace of the Woolamander. Anakin noticed that the same letters he'd seen carved above the door were repeated on the stone walls inside the palace. Tahiri interrupted his thoughts. "So what happened to the Massassi?" she asked. "Nobody really knows," Anakin replied as he ran his hands along the palace walls. "But there was one story about them that my father once told me," he said. Anakin's voice echoed in the empty hallways as he began to tell Tahiri the story. Years ago, there was a man named Drun-Un. He was from the star system Sulist. Drun-Un was a Solistan. "Have you ever seen one?" Anakin asked Tahiri. She shook her head. "Well, Solistans are humanoids with round ears, large round eyes, and heavy cheeks that hang down their faces. Anyway, Drun-Un was a history and nature lover, and he spent a lot of his life studying Yavin 4. He studied all of the old temples on this planet. By digging beneath the temples, he learned about the Massassi. According to Drun, Anakin continued, over 5,000 years ago, the exiled Sith magicians, whom nobody knows much about except that they're feared and that Darth Vader was one, settled on Yavin 4. The magicians married the natives to create the race of Massassi. 1,000 years later, an evil Jedi Knight named Exar Kun came to Yavin 4 to enslave the Massassi, build more temples, and resurrect the Sith teachings. Exar Kun was wiped out in the Great Sith War, which pitted the Old Republic and the Jedi Knights against the followers of Kun, who called himself the Dark Lord of the Sith. "That story gives me the chills," Tahiri said. "Especially the part about Darth Vader being part of the Sith." "Yeah, me too," Anakin agreed. Tahiri and Anakin could still hear the storm raging outside the palace walls. They turned a corner and stood before a crumbling wall of stone blocks. "I guess this is a dead end," Anakin said. They were just about to turn around when R2's light stopped at a hole in the wall. Tahiri walked forward and peered through the hole. She could see a long stone stairway that wound down through the floor of the palace. Before Anakin could stop her, Tahiri had crawled through the hole. "Wait, Tahiri," Anakin called. "Someone built this wall so that we wouldn't go down those stairs," he said. "Well, the wall is crumbling, so maybe now we're meant to go down," Tahiri called back. R2 began to beep and blip loudly. "I don't think he wants us to go down there," Anakin said. "And he's not the only one." Anakin had poked his head through the hole and could actually sense something evil floating up the stone stairs. The hairs on his arms rose. R2 continued to beep beep. Anakin crawled through the hole and joined his friend. Tahiri hadn't started down the stone stairway. "There's something evil here," she whispered in a small voice. "Anakin, what if those Dark Lord guys are still here?" "Maybe we should turn back," Anakin whispered. "No," Tahiri said fiercely, her green eyes flashing. "We've come this far. I'm not going to turn back just because I sense that something bad is trying to scare us away." "Anakin, you said that you felt like we were being called to perform an important task. Maybe it's something that will help us become Jedi Knights. If that's true, there's no way I'm going to turn back." Tahiri began to make her way down the stairway. There were loose stones, and several times she almost fell. "Tahiri, wait!" Anakin called, but she kept moving. Anakin rushed down after his friend. "This is not the way I like to do things," Anakin thought. "I like to think, to figure out the choices." He slid his feet along the broken stairs. He thought about the fact that Darth Vader had been a part of the Sith. He always tried not to think of Vader as his grandfather. But Vader had once been Anakin Skywalker, Luke and Leia's father, and that made him Anakin's grandfather. But that was before he began using the Force for evil and became Vader. Anakin wished his parents hadn't named him after his mom's father. He had once asked his mother why she had chosen to name him after Vader. "You weren't named after Darth Vader," Leia had explained. "You were named after my father. He was Anakin Skywalker, not Vader. And before he died, your grandfather did turn away from the dark side. He died saving your Uncle Luke's life." Leia had told Anakin that it was important to remember that the power of the Force could turn even a good man to the dark side. "Anakin, to me your name reminds me of hope," Leia had explained. "Hope that even when a Jedi uses the Force for the dark side, he can choose to turn back to the light, just as my father Anakin Skywalker did." Right now, Anakin didn't need any reminders about the dark side. It was all around him. It coated the walls of the stairway in sticky darkness. Anakin could feel it trying to cover him. It tugged at the sleeves of his jumpsuit and swirled around his head. He pushed it aside with his mind and followed his friend down the spiral stairway. Whatever was down there, he and Tahiri would meet it together. I am going to get kicked out of the Jedi Academy for this, Anakin said under his breath as he climbed down the stairway. Not only that, I'm probably going to run into that Dark Lord of the Sith and end up in even bigger trouble. Anakin could hardly see Tahiri's back in the darkness as the two climbed down the stairs, and he could barely hear R2 beeping in the distance. The stairway was too broken and winding for the droid to manage, so R2 had stayed behind. Anakin was sure that the droid was telling them both to come back. Tahiri, will you please wait for me? I can't see anything, Anakin called out. Without R2's light, which had been lost right after the stairway turned away from the crumbling wall, it was almost impossible to see. At least if Tahiri was right in front of him, he said to himself, he would be able to tell where to walk. I can't see any better than you can, Tahiri called back. This is quite an adventure, isn't it, Anakin? She began to chatter. We'd probably just be looking at holographs if we were back at the temple right now. Instead, we're... Yipes! Anakin had heard his friend begin to fall before she'd cried out, and now there was a quiet rumble as the stone she was on gave way. Tahiri, are you okay? He called as he tried to move quickly down the stairs. He could barely see her when he bent down. Yeah, I think so, she said. Serves me right for talking so much, instead of concentrating on where I was going. Anakin smiled in the darkness. He moved to help Tahiri to her feet. She gave a small yelp. What's wrong, he asked. My foot is caught under something, Tahiri explained. Anakin searched the darkness around Tahiri's foot with his hand. Your foot is wedged under a heavy stone, Anakin groaned as he tried to move the rock. Let's do this together, Tahiri suggested. They concentrated on using the Force. Slowly, the stone rose and then fell to one side. Tahiri pulled her foot out of a small hole. Is it broken or cut? Anakin asked. Tahiri bent down to feel her bare foot. Not a scratch, she said in amazement. A moment later, her hand brushed against something. Something that was not another rock.